Hello and welcome to the Dungeon Masters Guildhouse. This is a weekly podcast in which I, your host, Matthew Whitby, sit down with people all across the tabletop, RPG, DMs Guild, and surrounding tabletop RPG space. And this week, I'm delighted to be joined by Chris Valentine. Hello.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty sure as I just mentioned while we're out of the recording zone. We're now in the recording zone. Prior to that. I'm putting some finishing touches on a product, which is very kind of exciting. Which I think by the time that people are listening, it should already be out. Touch wood, assuming there's not any kind of near disaster. But it's nice kind of getting over that finish line, or like see the end is in sight.
Sure, yeah, that downhill ascension where you can actually see your goal.
Yeah. What about yourself? How have you been?
What was that?
What about yourself? How have you been?
I'm sorry. I've been well. I actually just finished converting a module over for the Foundry virtual tabletop system.
Interesting.
And that was the first time I'd done that. So I'm on the downward slope of that as well. We're just getting out there now, and it's an interesting process, and it's kind of a neat little thing.
You know what? I kind of ask. I'm curious about that now. What is kind of like that? Because I know that there's obviously there's the virtual tabletop system varies a lot, but is there like a good amount of like not like coding in that sense of like?
No, I mean there's a little bit some configuration files mostly to set up, but I do my maps in Dungeon Draft and Wonder Draft, which thankfully already has the lighting and the wall structure built in. So once I've done it the first time, it just saves it like that. And because I did it that way, it's super easy to import and can kind of set up. And there is a little bit of technical parts because Foundry is a little bit technical itself, but it really wasn't too bad. And once it's going, it's so nice to look at. I mean, when the DMs purchase it and put it in their system, it's ready to go. So it's really nice thing.
Nice. Well, if you don't mind me asking, what exactly are you kind of like converting? Is it kind of like a series of like maps or?
No. So last year I did a challenge to myself to build a Halloween module in 1 month.
Yeah.
Sadly, I did it in October, so it was actually done on Halloween, which was no time for anybody to use it. So that was last year. So I have like taken that and turned it into it's a big adventure. It's actually over 100 pages. It has 20 different scenes, and
wow.
And I just converted all those. I figured it was a great little starter town. It has a magic shop and an inn and a general store and all that stuff. So I put that whole adventure into the virtual tabletop system now, so it can be played online, which people are still playing online a lot for just pandemic this or that. It's now I just finished it on October. As I say, I just came off of that 1st of October and put it up. So hopefully this year now they can play my Halloween adventure that I actually wrote last year.
Wow, 100 again. It's kind of like you never really can anticipate the kind of scope of a project. And
for sure.
Was it the case? Like, at what point did you realize, this is going to be beefy? There's a lot in it.
Well, if you know my personality, everything I do has to be epic as far as these adventures. I can't make an adventure that doesn't end up being part of a trilogy or part of a continuation or a sequel or something. So as I was doing it, I realized that I had a great little town, so now I had to add to it to actually make it a complete town. So it didn't have a general store, so I added that. It didn't have a tailor or a smith, so I added those things. And as I did that, those things spawned new story ideas. So, and the idea of it was to be an adventure you can come back to every Halloween and or any kind of spooky day and run a different area of the town. Maybe you're going to go over to this ruin this time, but next time you run this, you can go to the wharf and see what's happening there, or anything like that. It's pretty versatile.
I think seasonally, or is it, you can get away with, again, spooky events around October. And then there's also that weird thing where you can get a little bit spooky around Christmas. Yeah. I think that's literally only because of Nightmare Before Christmas has kind of made that a valid option. But no, I think you're right. We need more kind of like spooky holidays, just kind of dotted throughout the year.
In that one, actually, because it came out on Halloween, and I wanted to be able to give it to people, and it was too late, I actually went back and added in, here in the US, the Thanksgiving holiday. Since it was already harvest, I just added in a couple more chapters that took care of Thanksgiving. So now I can actually run for both of those holidays, which I'm very happy about.
So is the plan to like almost like drip feed, keep expanding it so you're kind of covered all year round? Or
you know what, kind of, because I had a Wicker Jack Saves Christmas idea that will incorporate quite nicely, I think.
So I guess to kind of talk more broadly then. You kind of mentioned it yourself that, again, kind of a big fan of writing adventures. But for the people kind of listening, what are like, again, the kind of main sort of products that you kind of have released out over the course of your career?
So it's been about 2 years, though I did take a long hiatus during this pandemic to deal with pandemic things.
Yeah.
But mostly adventures. That's really what I love, is the stories and the what if scenarios, and what happens if these two entities collided, or this person discovered this, that kind of thing. So I mostly put out adventures. I have a subclass out, another subclass getting ready to come out. I've put out a divination system, which is just roll 2d8s and you can read your own fortune type of a thing. But mostly adventures. That's what I like. My goal will be to have like full campaign books that are third party. Unless Wizards of the Coast hires me to do that, wouldn't say no. But that's really what I've done. I've got a trilogy that just came out last month that integrates with the Ghosts of Saltmarsh book, and a big Shadowfell campaign that people seem to really like. Interesting.
So is it the case of some of these adventures kind of stemming from kind of like your home games, or is it kind of like, again, kind of exploring ideas of like, oh, this would be kind of cool, and kind of...
It's a mix of both. I have one that's really early stages of development right now called Everstorm, which is my home campaign that I took meticulous notes during, and I plan to release that as a campaign at some point. So that would be from a home game. The trilogy I just mentioned in Ghosts of Saltmarsh, I DM at conventions a lot, or at least I did when there were a lot of conventions. And Ghosts of Saltmarsh was always something I came back to because I had the book, and then I had all the miniatures printed, 3D printed out, and it was very convenient. So I used that to then spurn that trilogy that I just made. And then the rest of it is just my what if ideas that just came. I have like a really overactive imagination, so the more I can capture, the better.
So I guess as well, I'm always kind of fascinated about people who kind of set with like multi-part adventure or do kind of like adventure chains. What is it about like trilogies that is kind of like alluring? Is it the fact that like you can kind of tell like a whole kind of arching story, or is it the fact that like after you do one adventure, you're just like, oh, there's so much I kind of want to expand or add on?
I think that is, you're probably familiar with the phrase about killing your darlings and don't get too set on things. Well, I think I have a problem with that, is that I just put them in the next adventure instead of getting rid of them. I don't cut it. I like, oh, we'll go into the next adventure. I've already had the idea, and it's already sort of mapped out, and I've already laid the groundwork. And as well as far as like a sales perspective, if so-and-so DM has already purchased this adventure, it's high likelihood they'll want to continue with those characters on the next one. So it kind of has its own built-in audience.
And I guess do you do anything to kind of circumvent potentially people buying like the second or third one in adventure, that it kind of can, because again, that's something to kind of be aware of, that you can go either two way of like, no, this is a story thread through that you need one to go to the next, or you can have the second one where like people can start here. It just, there may be some hanging kind of plot points that you kind of need to.
I don't do anything to circumvent it for sure. I try to make sure that they all can run standalone.
Yeah.
If that's the desire. And I put a little recap of what happened in the last one if they want to know, or I mentioned a few ways how they can just come right into it. And then at the end of it, it will have a good ending that doesn't require the next one to go forward, so that they can go where they want to go, or they can get the next part either way.
Oh, fantastic. And I take it, so is with some of these kind of, I guess, trilogy projects and stuff like that, were there points where you're just like, I'm not entirely sure whether it kind of like, I guess I'm trying to ask, like, did you, when you sit down to write the first one, are you already thinking of like how it connects to the third? Or is it once you finish the first one, you're like, okay, I've got some more kind of, again, I've got more ideas that didn't quite fit into this one?
I think it's in the middle somewhere of the first one, let's say. I've got the queen or the king or the villain or the bandit or whatever it is. And as I'm putting that together with the little pieces of the plot and the character structure and the environment, that were, excuse me, my overactive imagination goes, well, what happens if that, has this bandit been to other towns, and what's the repercussions there? Are they waiting for him? Is there a wanted poster for this person over there? And then, all those thoughts, they just keep coming. So I try to record them, as much as I can. And then if I get enough of them together, which I always have, there's another story there to be told.
So then I guess, because I when it comes to writing adventures, then I'm always kind of fascinated, because I don't know whether there is kind of two schools of thought, but I noticed that there are kind of, you can easily write two distinctly different types of adventures, and one where it's kind of like very sort of event driven, where you have kind of like a fixed location, which can again have like a good number of locations that the party can kind of explore and go about, or you have the kind of I guess I'll call it like the fellowship approach, where it's just like you're going from like point to point, and each kind of point is its own kind of unique vista. It sounds like this 100-page project that you kind of been working on is a little kind of like maybe a little bit more of the latter, with kind of a fully fleshed town that I imagine maybe at points you kind of venture out of, but that kind of location is kind of almost like the centerpiece itself.
Yeah, that's correct. And that the Halloween one, Wickerjack, it is definitely centered around the town. As a matter of fact, all the plot points happen in old buildings in the town, or with the history of the town, or just in the woods around town. It's all definitely centered right in that town. And that's kind of the norm, I would say, of how I do it, because I've invested a lot of creation in the thing. They don't just move on immediately and go somewhere else. At least not yet. I haven't done it.
I think that's something like that's always that balance of like, because obviously you kind of have like the starting story point, which is just like, oh, you start in a town, and then as a designer, you're always just like, well, what's in that town, and then you start kind of filling out the town. And it's like, for the quest, they may not go here. But it's just like kind of like natural impulse to kind of like, again, not have the DM going, there's a tailor, and then kind of having to kind of is that something that you kind of like to lean into that, and you like to kind of like, again, as much as possible, kind of say, here's all these things, look at whatever happens kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm very into continuity, good continuity, and I'm always afraid of when I run something, somebody will ask, well, why did that guy come to this town? Why did that lady run away from wherever? Why did this orc tribe march through? What was their motivation? Where'd they come from? Why didn't they go with some other? I'm always certain that I need to have all those answers, even though I probably don't. It's probably fine, but I think I do. And then in the midst of that, I end up with all this material.
Well, so I guess what is one of the ways that you kind of go about kind of ensuring, I was about to say combating continuity, but you don't want to combat it. You want to maintain it.
Yeah. I have a great big timeline. I'm an outliner. I like to do top down. So I have these big bullet points, and I just continuously drill down. Well, I always have one that is a timeline of when things happen. So 50 years, it doesn't have to be specific, but 50 years ago, a year ago, 100 years ago, 3 months ago. And if there's any major events, I always stick them in that timeline so that I never say the wrong thing somewhere else about when something happened. And I can always quickly refer to it that, this event happened after this event, so this person would know this information or wouldn't know this information, that type of thing.
And is the timeline, is that something you'd like to try and kind of like throw into the products themselves, or is that mainly just from like a designer standpoint, it's a useful tool to kind of get?
It's just mostly for me, though the one that I just did for Halloween actually does show the timeline, because that specific town has a lot to do with when things happen. So I put it in there. But usually it's just for me to keep everything straight in my head so that I don't end up contradicting myself.
No, it's interesting because there are like a number of like times in process where I've kind of, I don't know, I've busted out like an Excel sheet to try and like make sense of like a particular plot point or the way certain things happen. That sometimes I'm always like, you know what, like this has been useful for me as a designer trying to get my head straight. Maybe this is something I can just throw in the adventure that from a DM's kind of standpoint, they might kind of find useful. And it sounds like, again, so at least with the, this kind of timeline for, Wickerjack was kind of the same sort of thing. I'm curious, has there been anything else like that where you've kind of made something that you're just like, this isn't quite, I guess, like quote unquote traditional for like an adventure format, but it's useful.
So I have done, and this may be adjacent to what you're asking, but I think it's mostly pertinent. As I did my first big adventure, it was called Lost in Shadow, and it was a mimic of the original D&D beginners box, the 5e beginners box. where they go to Lost Mine of Phandelver, and there's all those different locations. Well, I made a Shadowfell version of that, where you go to all the same locations, but they're the Shadowfell versions of those locations. So sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're destroyed, sometimes they're entirely different. And that was a little bit, I mean, it's been very successful. People seem to really like it. And again, they're going back to something familiar, but it's also different.
Yeah.
And I'm actually working on a sequel for that, is where they do all these same things in the Feywild version of those locations.
Okay.
And then I should have done a timeline, which I'll have to redo retroactively, is the sequel after that, if I get to it, will be they come back from the Feywild into the regular Tribor area, which is where Lost Mines takes place. But centuries have passed.
Oh, okay.
But Feywild has weird times, so they come back and they're like, "Wait a second, it's now 200 years later. How do we get back to where we started?"
I think it's really easy for, like, again, Feywild campaigns, because you always have to be like, okay, well, let them go to the Feywild, and then there's a moment of like, how am I going to deal with them leaving? It's like there's no easy way to do it, because it can be one thing of like, oh, you literally weren't even gone. It happened like the whole adventure was 6 seconds, and that's fine. But then you have the other end of the spectrum where it's like, oh, this is world ending. Everything has kind of continued in the background. But I did want to say, I do really like that idea about literally having essentially numerous adventures all based in the same location, kind of playing around with that kind of Feywild and Shadowfell, because it took a little while for me to kind of get my head wrapped around it. But it's the fact that, like, they're kind of like, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it, is like the material plane is like one frequency, and the Feywild and like the Shadowfell are the same frequency, but just kind of like pitch shifted.
Sure, yeah, different amplitude. Yeah.
I don't know if there's probably like sound engineers listening that like, what are you saying? But for me, it makes sense. And I like that. I've been meaning to kind of dabble a little bit with the Shadowfell as well. Just because it's weird. It's kind of like that weird kind of spookiness. You got kind of, what is it, the home of the Raven Queen as well, which is a very kind of like enigmatic and, again, pretty cool character to kind of include. And yeah, on the other end of the spectrum, you kind of have the Feywild, which it's that I sometimes I struggle where it's like, I don't know if I always necessarily lean into kind of how scaled up to 11 everything is within the Feywild, and the fact that how kind of otherworldly, like, because it is otherworldly. So having to remember to describe the fact that all the colors you see are just like so vibrant, or the way that like the wind moves is that it is almost kind of like they're taking like a portal to like another planet.
I usually describe it as the Shadowfell as everything is desaturated. It's all that vibrance, like you just said, is removed, and the world itself, the land, wants to reclaim you. It wants to take you down. Everything you're like struggling to stand or move, because everything there wants death to be the homeostasis point. And Feywild is the other way around. It's like beaming with life, and it wants to overcharge everything and supersaturate it. And you have enormous, primordial energies that are just at work against each other and against you.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to see it. That's kind of like viewing them from viewing both kind of planes through the lens of like how they view life is a good way to do that. What are some of the kind of interesting things that you kind of try to incorporate with working with like the Shadowfell in particular?
I've tried to incorporate apathy a lot. So a lot of the things there, they don't have a drive. Like they exist and drudge through because that's what they have to do, and they're not super driven to succeed or to reach a goal or something. They're kind of and traditionally that plane of shadow is kind of a fugue state, on the way to death or after death. So I try to capture that as that these individuals just are not motivated much other than going through the routine, just mindlessly through a routine, and that's kind of what they do.
Actually, so correct me if I'm wrong. So obviously they are kind of like the material plane, but kind of like pitch shifted. There's not like Feywild copies or Shadowfell copies of individuals. It's just people who inhabit those. Or does it work like that? Again, I'm not entirely sure.
I don't recall ever. I did a lot of research. I don't recall ever seeing an individual entity with a personality that had a different version in each world. It's always just the environment or the structures and that kind of thing. I don't recall ever seeing an actual person.
And then there's just the kind of the typical individuals who inhabit the Feywild or the Shadowfell are just, again, either they found themselves, because I think with the Shadowfell you can find yourself in there if you experience, again, a good amount of dread or apathy, or kind of because that's another thing as well. Again, this is like deep lore talk, isn't it? The all the kind of domains of dread kind of sit adjacent to or in the Shadowfell.
Yeah, they're just little pocket bubbles inside the Shadowfell. Yeah, and the Wicker Jack, actually, coincidentally, at least I thought I had invented it. Last year, I put where Wicker Jack is from, because he's an Archfey, from a Feywild version of a Domain of Dread, which I called a Domain of Fervor back then, but now it's just come out that these are now Domains of Delight. So, same thing. But yeah, it's really amazing the space you can work with, and even if you can't find where you're working, you just create your own little bubble.
Yeah, no, I do like kind of like leeway of like the moment you kind of start dealing with like wizards and kind of like extra planar like bubbles, you know, anything like you don't necessarily have to be absolutely kind of beholden to the Forgotten Realms lore, but sometimes it's nice to kind of dip in every now and then. So I guess kind of like more broadly then, across kind of all of your kind of like adventure paths and everything that you can have done, is there like a kind of pretty consistent kind of like starting point of like where you kind of draw inspiration from? Or
I mean, I watch fantasy movies, I see books, I've read when I was little growing up, my dad didn't think Dungeons & Dragons was cool so much, so it wasn't something I was encouraged, so I didn't play a lot. I mean, I was aware of it, I played a couple times, and then mostly I would buy the books and just read them, because that's what I could do on my own, and I have to find people to play with. And we moved a lot and stuff. So I've always read the lore. I thought that was amazing, the stories. And then same with films, when you can find them. There's sometimes not the right type of fantasy films, or at least not the type that I like. But nowadays, as far as inspiration of where I'm starting, I have like a perpetual what if engine that runs in my head at all times. And that's predominantly where any idea I have comes in. What if this happened and this happened at the same time? What would the outcome be? And from that springs the idea.
I was curious. So is it kind of like, as you kind of like, I guess, reading through kind of like the newer D&D books, or just kind of looking around in particular, what are the kind of, I guess, areas that you find yourself kind of latching to for like a what if scenario? Is it typically sometimes like I guess like particular types of magic, particular art of like items of power, or is it just like, just like, like a, I don't know, like I'm thinking more of like a turbulent sea,
I mean, I don't want to give the cop-out answer, but it's kind of a little bit of everything. I mean, if I see a creature has this amazing ability, and I think, well, how would a creature like with that ability live? Like if they could, I don't know, if they can make cake anytime they wanted to, what would that life be like? So obviously they'd own a bakery, right? I mean, they'd profit off it if they could, and maybe they would have lots of different types of cake, or it's really anything I read. I do read the books just as books usually, unless I plan to play the campaign. I have a whole section of my bookshelf that's the published D&D material, but I haven't opened it at all because I want to play it someday.
Yeah. I think that there is like a certain talent to like being able to play through kind of like an adventure book that you yourself have kind of read through, and just kind of like, no, I know there's a secret door in this room, but I just have to hold my hand up and hope someone else kind of finds it. I did kind of, I guess I kind of want to ask about, because you kind of mentioned that you did a fair bit of kind of like, I guess, like Adventure League content.
Yes, that was my first. Okay, so again, I didn't play when I was young very much. I wasn't encouraged. I spent many years just in my peripherals, knowing that it existed, but never, I didn't know where to find the people. I didn't know what to do. So I went to a gaming convention a few years ago, 5 years ago, something like that. And they had this like where you can play board games or try different games. And we did that a little bit, me and my wife, and they had a Pathfinder game. We tried that. It really went horribly. I don't think because of Pathfinder. I think Pathfinder's fine. I think it was the people that were hosting it were not very good at explaining it. The following year, we went back there again, and there was a 5e Adventurers League group, and they were much better at explaining it, and we really had fun. So we then sought out game stores to play at. and we started playing with people, started meeting people, and I was like, wow, I would really like to make my own world. That sounds really cool. And then I noticed that some of the adventures we would play were the CCC modules that they had that were created for conventions. And I was like, oh, I can write one myself. That's even better. And so that became my goal. I was like, oh, great, I'm going to write this, and then they're going to have it at conventions, and people will play it, and then I'll be famous, soon because I'm so great. Everybody's going to know it. So I started writing that. Yeah, and it was kind of not a fun process because, and I don't want to talk bad about the Wizards of the Coast people. I'm sure they're busy or whatever, but it took like 8 or 9 or 10 months for my adventure to be edited because I was always waiting on the return of the adventure. I'd do my edits, I'd send it in, and it would take 2 months for me to hear back.
Yeah.
So that kind of dragged that on. And then by the time it actually was released, they said, okay, here you go. You can put it on DMsGuild. It's good to go. I was like, great. Finally, I'm here it is. And then they changed the rules where you can't play historic adventures anymore with new characters. So I was like, wow, that doesn't really work great.
Yeah.
So I did get it on there. I mean, it was a great experience because through all that editing, and they were super strict. At least all my stuff that I write now should be like, right on the style guide. I should have everything written super well.
Yeah. Yeah. I must admit, I've always found that the kind of like there's a very kind of particular set of skills to writing like CCC or what's it called, Dungeon Craft content. Mm-hmm. And I think that again, I think the rules to Dungeon Craft, I think again you still have to follow the saga and all that, but I think they're slightly more lax now. Again,
for sure. Yeah, they're much better. And as a matter of fact, I kind of do them again now because you can now create your own stories. They had a way to do it where you had to follow a certain story seed, and you had to begin it that way and end it with a magic item that really wasn't that great. But they've changed it now where you can have your own domain of delight, except with this season, and you can write whatever you want, and the list of rewards is much better. And like you said, it's more lax, and there's not so much oversight. You can just do it, and I guess they let the populace determine whether it was good or not by sales or by reviews or something like that. But yeah, it's much better now. But
the kind of, I guess, the kind of rules of old, it's kind of like it's a very interesting way to kind of view adventure writing. It's kind of the case of where it's kind of like, I guess, like not it's purpose over form. It's kind of like each kind of section you kind of have to be like, does this, again, on a quick glance, does this help the DM in any way, shape, or form? If not, cut it, or just because like you're working with like very particular like con schedules that kind of have to fit within a time zone. So I think again, it kind of helps to when you're kind of writing other adventures, to kind of be like, okay, this has everything you kind of need. And I do know with kind of the adventures that I've kind of written, kind of that I knowingly kind of working away from the kind of convention format. I'm so much more flowery with my like. I'm so much more like, this is like, I have all these words that I could now include, or kind of different kind of like a freedom, because I know that it's kind of a more relaxed kind of. Well, again, I don't know what the DM's going to be doing as they're playing. I just assume it's going to be more relaxed than that kind of convention. But I guess overall, to kind of bring it back to you, then is it? Would you say? So writing CCC content was kind of how you kind of started? Yeah, the desire to write it is how I started. The adventure that I released actually went to that RPG writer workshop, which I know a lot of people have been through. And I did that first because I wanted to make sure I understood the process and I had the general idea. And they were good at taking me through, I think it was a month-long thing, and you had the design process and the writing and the editing and then the publishing and then some of the marketing. And I did that, and the adventure that I made through that process has paid for the class. So it was, it was plenty good. Yeah. And then I started with the CCC was the next after that. I was like, okay. As a matter of fact, my module that I made in that class was a precursor to the module I intended to make for the CCC, because again, I can't not do trilogies. Apparently that's what I have to do. Yeah. But then I said it was a long process. So even though I did do it, it didn't come out for far later. And I guess I can't really blame the Wizards of the Coast editing process as much as I did. I forgot also the pandemic happened during this time. So the convention we were going to run it at got canceled.
other things also happened. So it was just my timing as far as when I was coming into this was not the best. So it was a kind of a bad experience.
So what was the first adventure that you wrote kind of out of the kind of, while all the kind of the convention stuff was kind of ongoing? What was kind of like, okay, well, I've tried my, adventure writer workshop. I've done a little bit of CCC now. What was kind of the next thing to kind of kick things off?
Well, in the midst of the CCC writing, as that was going back and forth with editing and whatnot, I was writing that Shadowfell adventure, which I wanted it to be an alternative starter campaign that takes you through all of Tier 1. Mm-hmm. So again, I'm always biting off more than I can chew. It's like a large adventure. It takes you through 4 levels.
Yeah.
So that one took a while. And then I finally got that out, and it was received well, which probably gave me the motivation to do more. And then the next thing after that was, I think I made an adventure that I think the Descent into Avernus book was coming out, mm-hmm. and the Ghosts of Saltmarsh book had just been out. And I was like, great, I'm going to make an adventure that takes you from Saltmarsh to Baldur's Gate, because everybody will need that. They're all going to need that. So I'll do that adventure. And that one was it's more like just a bunch of random encounters that happen on the sea as you're going from one location to another.
I must admit, there is, I think that's so clever. It feels like there's almost like a kind of like untapped market of because I don't know, just because like in the campaigns that I've kind of played have always kind of been kind of sticking to like one hardcover, but there's got to be groups out there who just like they're playing with one hardcover and they're just like, you know what, the moment the new one comes out, let's jump ship. And to kind of have like the adventures or kind of like tools in place to kind of help facilitate that kind of like transition between campaigns. What was the, I guess, so what were so from Saltmarsh to, I guess, Baldur's Gate then, what were like some of the kind of the themes you tried to kind of incorporate in to kind of, I guess, mesh the two campaigns or?
So in Saltmarsh, there was a devil, or something named Zendros that has a magic shop and you can buy magic items.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, great. We already have a devil here. This Descent into Avernus is all devils. So I'm going to make them the quest giver.
Nice.
And they had a dream, or I can't even remember right now, but they had a dream where they needed something and they hire the players to, the dream was like, something's going to happen in Baldur's Gate and I need you to get there and check on my interests or something like that. Mm-hmm. And during that time, then the devil entities want to prevent the players from going there. So as you're traveling through all the random encounters in the ocean, that somehow there's some kind of devil influence. And I even have one of those, I can't remember what they're called, the hell vehicles,
what are they called? We both know what about like the hell's, like I was about to call them Hell's Engines.
Yeah, right. Yeah, something like that. But I have a boat that's one of the engines. That's like a big, metal motorboat that tries to catch up with them to attack and stuff.
That also is something cool because like that's something that I don't think the Descent of Avernus didn't really tap into, because obviously you had bikes, you had trucks, you kind of had like infernal machines.
Infernal machines,
yeah. So I was looking off screen because I was looking at my book and I was going to go grab the hardcover because I don't think we had to have found out, but no, my brain remembered. But no, being able to do like some infernal boats kind of like, because I mean you want a vehicle for kind of every occasion, and they do kind of have like an infernal kind of like ship just by going, was it Zariel's Fortress?
Oh, I should mention this too. At the time I was doing it, the book wasn't out yet. So I was going off of previews or anything I can grab to get information. Like I knew there was soul coins, but I really didn't know what they did.
Yeah.
So, but I have one in the adventure, hoping I did it right. I did. I ended up having it in such a way that it made sense. But yeah, I was going off just previews and clips and little tiny things.
I have huge I really admire people who kind of do that kind of like, there's a product coming out on this date. We know some things, but we want to try and make things work. And I always remember hearing, what was it? There was the book of like mythic kind of creatures that was kind of due to come out kind of around the same kind of theorist date. That the day of release, they bought the book in digital form and then kind of had to go back through and kind of like this is kind of, I think that was Brian. and I believe Cassandra as well. I think that was some of the people on that team.
Yeah, I remember seeing that collaboration going through their Discord and them talking about it.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, no, but no. So was it? Were there anything that you kind of like once Baldur's Gate, like Descent into Furnace came out, that you were just like, okay, maybe I do need to change this part, or was it kind of the case that you kind of had set yourself up nicely that just like this is perfect? It just kind of.
So this is one of those books that I didn't want to open because I wanted to play it. So I kind of had to skim again very gingerly around to make sure that I think that my stuff, meshed well, and it did. And then I put the book away, and I think it still did a pretty good job.
No, fantastic. So well then I guess kind of like more broadly then. So yeah, we've kind of spoken a good bit about kind of like what some of your adventures have kind of included. When it comes down to sitting down and writing, do you have like a favorite and least favorite part of the process?
Yeah, for sure. So my favorite part is just the imaginative process, like the what if, like I've been talking about, is thinking about it, drawing out conclusions, and then and there's a time when I was younger or less experienced, whichever one you want to use, they always talk about, you hear an author say, I didn't write this. The story told me that this was a thing. It's not something I came up with. Once it's like stories all exist somewhere in some dimension, and you just tap into it, and then you start learning it from. You didn't even write it, but it's obvious that clearly this must have been the case.
Yeah.
So that's my favorite part. I think is just that I think I invented this character. I think I invented this scenario or this location, but really once I start writing it, I see that maybe it's always existed and things flow because that's how they had to have flown, and it was just a great little thing when you realize that. So
I guess one thing that I'm kind of, so before kind of getting onto kind of like your least favorite part, I kind of want to ask, because in kind of imagining kind of like what if scenarios and like putting yourself into the shoes of certain characters to think about logically, like would they do X or Y? Do you put, I guess like where is kind of like the limit? Or like, is there ever a point where you're just like, I think I've kind of worked out enough? Just because I feel like, especially like if, again, my mind goes straight to like putting myself either in the mind of a wizard or a goblin. Goblin, it's a lot easier. Wizard, I just feel like there's almost like no end. It kind of spirals off in every which direction.
Yeah, I run into that all the time. And I have to kind of reel myself in when I say, okay, I don't have to answer every question. The DM needs to have room to work. So I can just set up some broad strokes. Mm-hmm. And even though I may know the answers, at least to what I think they are, I have them written down. I don't put them in the publication so that I'm not narrow focused that this only has to run one particular way.
So when it comes to like, I guess, an individual or location, then are there kind of like a set of core questions that you always try and have like the answers for, or?
So with the characters, let's say there is the same, very similar to when you're designing a character with the flaw and the bond and the this and that. So the same with locations. I have, what is their export? What do they import? Is this a small town or, it's a city? Is it a town? Is it a huge metropolis? What kind of people come there? What is their form of tourism? So that's, what they think is the most unique. What would people go on vacation here to see? Just some basic things like that kind of help paint a little bit of more of a rounder picture. So it's not so robotic. And then as far as that, and then I have like regions have a little bit too, like, this is or biome, I should say, right? This is a marsh. So what type of things do people who live in a marsh do that people who live in the desert don't do? Is water is super important, or is, dry clothes really important, or whatever the different pieces are.
No, I expect, yeah. So I guess it's kind of again, it's kind of nice that you kind of do have those almost like bullet point lists. Like the kind of like, oh, this is the information that summarizes this individual or this kind of location. No, fair. And then I guess again, sorry, because I did cut you off, but your least favorite part of the process.
So my least favorite part is the tedium parts that kind of join all the creative parts together. Like, I need to proofread, but that's not fun per se. You have to do editing. You have to do word counts, or you have to market. Actually, I should say marketing is probably my least favorite part. I'm an introverted person. I don't like to go out there and and have to like sell myself or sell my stuff.
Yeah.
So that was probably, I should retroactively change it. Yeah, marketing is my least favorite.
I think there is that point where obviously like there are always going to be like different points where it's like there's little like trips across the kind of the path of a process, and the fact that marketing is that case of like where you like it's I don't know what it is. I think it's the same way when I hit it at the end of the project before like editing, and the same with when I release the project, my brain enters that mode of like I'm done. I've like in the first part, it's like I've written the thing. It has been done. Then obviously I have to go through and kind of like, respond to all the edits. And then when I press like push live, I'm done. It's like, it's literally out, but it's not, because you have the whole kind of marketing stuff that you kind of need to keep going on and kind of pushing through. And yeah, no, I'm with you on that one. And I'm always kind of watching kind of the way other people kind of tackle marketing as kind of like points of inspiration. But I don't know. It just feels like it's a tough space to kind of, because it's just that kind of case of I guess being just regularly standing on top of a hill and shouting and being happy to shout every so often. And then
my method is to emulate what's working for other people, because it's not something that's natural for me. So if I see somebody that's very popular and their stuff is selling or their stuff is being talked about, I just try to do whatever I saw them do.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think as well, it makes me always think about, because like putting it in context of like a Kickstarter campaign, just the fact that it's that kind of like month-long stint of where you kind of need to kind of keep up that kind of like that and I'm just like I don't think I have it in me.
And one thing I've learned too is that Kickstarters are not they're that month, but then there's like a 3, 4, 6 month period before that where you're trying to build the momentum, and then you're just finally pulling the cork on the month-long thing. And so it's like a big process.
Yeah. So no, I must admit, it is that case of like where I know I kind of a weakness that I have as a person is the fact that I once get products past that finish line to like released out and stuff like that, I'm kind of like I don't really do so much promo as much anymore. It kind of it reaches that 2-week mark where I was like, it's been out for 2 weeks, whatever it is. But I mean, there's honestly nothing stopping you from like, I don't know, every now and then kind of being like, hey, it's like a retro. Wait, I was trying to think of a good day, because it always needs to rhyme. Throwback Thursdays. There you go. It's Throwback Thursday. Here's a product that I released yonks ago. But yeah, I don't know.
In a perfect world, I would have a person that does that for me. I would be able to pay that, or divide the royalties or whatever, and I would be like, great, I've done my designer part. Please do your part to sell that, and we'll get along great. I'll get started on the next one. I mean,
I think I've said this a few times before, but there's a reason why that people have like marketing departments. I'm just like it's a job. Marketing is a whole kind of thing in itself. So I don't know. Maybe I need to take like a crash course in marketing, and maybe that'll.
So surprisingly, that RPG workshop I did, they actually did have a marketing. I did that a year later, and it has a lot of good notes. There's a lot of good stuff, but again, that doesn't come natural for me. So even though I have the notes, I don't think to check them or think to do them.
If you don't mind me asking, is there anyone that you kind of remember off the top of your head of like what was like some of their advice?
Well, putting yourself out there is first. Especially like even this video we're doing right now. I have to force myself to be public or to be exposed, let's say, because I'm sure there's some self-esteem issues there, or confidence issues. So that's one of the first things is just I remember a lot of it's like put yourself out there, be in new places, like talk to people and interact, and of course I'm going like, whoa, that's a very vulnerable situation. I don't know when I'll do that.
Yeah.
Another one is like venues, like not convention venues, but like avenues of where there's forums, or there's Discord, or there's social media talking about that. And I think another one of the big ones is mailing lists or fan bases. That's the big one, is that if you already connect with a person and a purchaser or somebody who likes what the type of stuff you write, because everybody has their own tone, and you can retain that and talk to them, you'll be able to give them material time and time again, because your tones match up, or your what you guys like is the same.
Yeah, no, I think it's the case of like there was that recent kind of kick where a lot of people were like, oh yeah, no, I should get like a mailing list and stuff like that. And I was like, I think I was too lazy at the time to try and put something together. But it's like a case of like it does just make sense because it's kind of that other tool of like again it's I think the best way I view marketing is it 9 times out of 10 the best approach is something of a shotgun approach where it's far as wide as possible and you just hope that something somewhere hits. And yeah, having like the kind of see, it's bad. I've already forgotten the word for it. The email list, is that what it's called?
Yeah, email marketing, email list.
Yeah, it's just one way of like people who like your stuff can kind of stay in the know about it.
And another hard thing about it is now there's this list, and I got to talk to this list once every month, week, whatever the iteration is, and I'm like, well, what do I have to say that they want to hear? Do they really care that I typed a lot in Word, or that I drew some maps? I mean, obviously that's what I'm doing. Why do they want to hear it?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I think people always appreciate free stuff. So hey, throwing like a map their way, I'm sure that people love that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right.
Yeah. So I guess kind of to dig a little bit deeper then into kind of like your creative process about some of the things you've done already. Is there like a design choice that you've kind of made that you kind of like, I nailed it with that one?
I'll have to go back to my Shadowfell adventure. I think I haven't seen anybody do that with the similar locations and the and another thing I haven't mentioned yet is that a lot of the things that you're seeing in the Shadowfell versions of these things are things that you've seen on the prime material side, but you didn't realize it. Like if you're familiar with that adventure, there's a forge of spells or spell forge or something that people make magic items with. Well, I put a creature in the same location in the Shadowfell that's being sapped of their magical energy. So now you know why the spell forge does what it does. It's siphoning from this other creature who's suffering because of it. So you got to think now, a good thing or whatever.
I love the idea of like taking a known location and then kind of like flipping the script on it and kind of presenting it in an entirely new light. Was it kind of easy to kind of come up with like, I guess, Shadowfell versions of some of these locations, or?
It was, I again, since I used the actual Lost Mine story, because I wanted to make sure my stuff had good continuity with it.
Yeah.
It wasn't difficult, I suppose, because I could kind of just see what little art objects did they find in this location. Like one of them, for example, is in the Cragmaw hideout, which is a cave. That's like the first location you really go to in Lost Mine. They find this little frog statue, and it's just an art object worth 50 gold or something like that. So I use that as the start of the adventure. It's not just an art object, it's a magic item, or it's a piece of a ritual that the bullywugs used from the Shadowfell side, and it was just found on this side. But if you do this, this little couple of things, combine them, you get transported to the Shadowfell version of this cave, which is where a bullywug tribe lives, and you go there, and now you are, in a Shadowfell marsh, and there's all these different things. And so because I used the inspiration from the one side, it wasn't super difficult. And then I did a ton of research on how the planes work, just to make sure I kind of got the energy that needed to be there.
Yeah. Well, I guess one thing I always kind of like about doing kind of lore deep dives is kind of like those weird facts or weird bit of lore information that you kind of pick up. Any kind of really, really like niche lore stuff that you found out that you like?
I like the story of the Raven Queen from the Shadowfell. And it's changed over time. I think, like maybe it came out in 4E or something, and 5E is a little bit different, but it was like an exile from elves or something, and they ended up kind of taking over the Shadowfell, because there was, I want to say, Shar, maybe another god was in charge.
Yeah.
So they ended up like inheriting it, or actually, it doesn't actually state, if I recall, is that, some source says that Shar is in charge, and some other source says the Raven Queen's now in charge. So, I mean, are they both? Do they both know that it's been taken over, or is that
the Raven Queen gets it on the weekends? And...
Yeah, it's like a custody issue.
Yeah, no, I think because I think with it as well, because the Raven Queen is it the Fortress of Memories or something like this?
Yeah.
It's kind of weird things like that. I like to think of like there's this like plane of existence where memories are kept. And I guess it's just like, I don't know how that interacts with like the ethereal plane, because it technically isn't Jeez, this is getting really. But the ethereal plane's on the same spectrum.
Yeah, it's in the same inner plane, kind of overlaying all of those.
It's a real mess.
That's a good example, though. This Fortress of Memories, or whatever the real name is, but that's one of the creatures I created for the Shadowfell adventure. Is called a memory flurry, and this memory flurry is like a method sort of thing, but it has the ability to extract a memory from an individual, and then as soon as it does, it runs back to the Raven Queen with that memory. So I mean, that's like one of those what if things that I came up with. Is like, yeah, well, how do these memories get to her? Well, this is how they.
It's a little like pickpocket with like a
exactly, yeah.
No, awesome. No, fantastic. Then I guess kind of more broadly, then looking across your kind of your entire kind of catalog, is there like a particular lesson that you wish you maybe learned a little bit sooner?
Lesson that I learned sooner. Yeah, I'm like a perfectionist, really. If my stuff doesn't look like Wizards of the Coast stuff, I think I can't release it yet because it's not perfect, right? So I would have just said to myself, hey, it's better to do something and do it wrong and then get some feedback than not do it at all. Yeah. Which is what, like I said, I had a big hiatus, 8 months or something. I did nothing because I didn't want to do anything that was less than perfect, right? In retrospect, I would have just told myself, hey, just do it. You'll learn. Even if the only thing you learned on that project is how to upload it to DMsGuild for sale, at least you did something and you learned something and you got more iterations behind your processes and that type of thing, or refined your process. As a matter of fact, that's one of the big things I do now is I have a step-by-step process for writing something, get the idea, now make the outline, now expand on the outline, now fill in the descriptions or, whatever these items are. And at the last step of the process, after the marketing, is I go back through my process and I say, hey, what could have been better this time that I could write down? Because I feel if I get this process, instructions to myself, because when I get writer's block or just overwhelmed, I sometimes don't know what to do. Like, it seems like there's so much to do. But I can always just refer to this instruction set that I wrote for myself and say, okay, just do this. This is the step. Don't worry about it. This is the step. This process is proven. Just do the steps and it'll be fine. And then when I finally get more control over, what's going on, then I'll be right where I need to be and I can continue right there. Yeah, no, I'm the same way. I always feel like that step coming away from each project, it's like it works best when it feels like there's been a lesson in there. The fact that whether I've learned a new way to kind of tackle something, or my editors made me realize how much I use a particular phrase, and how I will, kind of work to diversify. And I think kind of having those processes, and I think what I kind of like as well, because I'm very similar to you in the fact that I kind of have the outline that I go and kind of flesh out. Following that kind of sort of approach, you kind of always have that kind of like that freedom, because as you kind of like flesh something out, that kind of gives you that freedom to like, oh, I've got this other idea now, and that can kind of expand and grow, and bit by bit, we're kind of giving yourself these kind of like little, I guess like breadcrumbs for like future like inspiration points. As a matter of fact, that touches on something I would like to do, is to have my own setting, right? Because if I have a setting, all these, like you said, branching out, they're in my setting, so it's just the next adventure or the next city or whatever. They're all going to be used and they're all pertinent. So I guess I kind of more like a slightly more targeted question about like how you would go about writing a setting. Would you kind of still tackle it from like, I guess, like almost like an adventure-driven approach, or would it be more kind of alongside like a kind of like almost like gazetteer or? So again, I do things epically, even though I shouldn't. So if I'm going to write a setting, I'm going to start with the world map, right? So I need to know what's to the west. I need to know what's to the east. I need to know what's to the north. Otherwise, I feel I'm going to be asked a question that I can't answer. But educating myself over the last year, and I read about adventure design and good adventures, and I review adventures just so I can learn. So I'm constantly learning. So it sounds like the consensus is the best place is probably just to start in a town, in a region, and just write an adventure there, and then let it grow from there. That's your seed point, and then let it grow out. So I'd probably force myself to do that, and it would also come out in, like you said, a gazetteer form. Is once I got that initial area done, I would just be releasing little bits, oh, this is some news from over here or whatever, and it just kind of builds up slowly.
Because it almost feels like there's so many different ways to do it. Obviously, you can have like the kind of all-encompassing tome that is everything, but I think almost from like it's that's very satisfying from like a designer standpoint. But then I guess you always have to think about it as well from like almost like a customer standpoint. And having like, I guess, like a really thin document that kind of is like this is the whole world sort of thing. This is kind of the stuff that you're going to be dealing with. And then having slightly thicker, kind of like more location specific, either adventure chains or, that kind of style of like, oh, here's a crow's a town crier's guide to this place. And then you kind of have all that kind of interesting information. Is probably a slightly more digestible way to do it.
Yeah, I think it also that way makes more sense because your customers, as you said, they can tell you what's interesting to them. Maybe you think that the desert area is super good and you're getting ready to write that as your first source book as the desert of my planet.
No.
But it turns out everybody loves this forest that you made, the dark forest, and everybody just keeps asking about it. And you go, oh, okay, now that I know that, I'll start with that dark forest. And that's what you want.
And I guess again, because as someone who kind of I kind of struggle from like always making things a little bit too big, it kind of, because you're not that point of like, oh, I've written 3 locations and I still have 7 more to go, and it's like I can't release this yet because I've only got 1 set. But then by breaking it up, it kind of hopefully makes everything more manageable. Maybe again, I don't have plans on doing like a setting guide anytime soon, but maybe that's how I'll do it if I were.
Yeah. Same thing. If I ever do a Patreon or some kind of thing where I have regular releases, it'll definitely be for a setting so that, for the material now goes with the material a year ago or a month ago or whatever.
Yeah, nice. So then I guess kind of more generally, and because bringing up like kind of Patreon and kind of the community as a whole, are there kind of like anyone, or is there anyone in the kind of community who particularly kind of inspires you?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many people and they all have their own angle. Immediately coming to mind as Travis Legg, who I've done some work with. He has like his own OSR setting that he works with, and I got to do some of the regional gazetteer things for that, and that was very interesting. JVC Perry, who has that Call from the Deep campaign book. I want to do a campaign book, so that's super nice. I think Anthony Joyce, who I look at his work, because he again started out with the AL stuff, and we can see where that's taken him, and he's been able to do different things. And there's so many names, and like I said, I read a lot. There's I want to say, is it Justin Alexander, who has a big website that has a bunch of design notes on it. Mm-hmm. And Keith Armand from the
things what the monsters do.
Yeah. So all these things are great.
I don't think I particularly like again not to again all amazing, but the kind of pointing to Keith Armand's like what the monsters know it is such like an interesting tool. It's kind of interesting to kind of look at how it kind of like supplements kind of existing content. And every now and then I do kind of like when I know there's going to be like a particularly challenging like fight up ahead. I always do find that there's sometimes like 1 or 2 tactics in there that I didn't necessarily think of. I'm like, that's evil. I like that. I'm gonna borrow that one. And that way, if the party dies, I'm not to blame. I can just point at like the
yeah. Particular one that I like is the Goblin, because the Goblin has a bonus action hide, and of course, if you're a creature with a bonus action hide, you're going to use that as often as you can. So
I know.
They become skirmishers who hide behind boulders and come out, slice you and go back there and hide again. It's really interesting.
Yeah, hiding behind that rock and everything. No, awesome. And then, well, I guess kind of generally then, because looking at the time, Chris, we've done it. It's been an hour. But I do want to hear about if there's some of the interesting stuff that you're working on at the moment.
Right now, I got the Feywild version of the Shadowfell campaign that I'm starting to go on. Mm-hmm. I've got a couple Domains of Delight that I'm working on. One of them is a demi-plane where the toys fight each other. It's like a toy soldier type of a thing. I got another subclass coming out, and then that used to be my campaign called Everstorm, which will be a campaign book, and I've been starting to work on that.
Wow, geez, fair. So it sounds like kind of like you're kind of quite used to kind of jumping between projects. Is that kind of a good way to kind of keep up kind of like motivation across?
Yeah, I have like a horrible writer's block. I mean, I have a family, I have kids, I have, another business I have to run. So I get distracted a lot. I'm actually worried about the level of distraction I receive lately. But yeah, if I get blocked in one area and I just can't do something, I just switch to something else that I can then, have fresh eyes on, and I have plenty of stuff to do, and kind of let that writer's block subside from the other area.
No, awesome. And then kind of, I guess, following on from that, because again, if people want to stay up to date and hear about all these cool projects, what's the best way for them to do that?
I got my website now. It's cryptwrite.com. I'm sure you'll have that in your show notes. It's difficult to spell, probably. Same thing, Twitter, same name. I'm there, as often as I can be. I'm not super into social media per se, as I'd rather just be writing. But either one of those is good, and I'm very interactive. If somebody talks to me, I talk back and let that go. I'm just not really good at instigating conversation, but I'm decent at having.
Yeah. No, so this is like the kind of case of where the green flag is open. No, I was going to compliment you on your portfolio website. It's very nice. I kind of
my
like
website.
It's kind of like I like the kind of pattern for like being able to kind of see all the products up front. I think it's a case of anytime I'm looking at like someone's like portfolio, I'm always like, I really need to update mine. Oh no, mine's getting old and rusty. Like I can't remember the last time I went through and kind of updated it with all the.
I use my traditionally through trade. I'm a programmer, so I use my skills there to hand code that, and I can like every time I release a new product, I have a little script I can run that will regenerate the entire website. And I can.
Yeah, I see. I was thinking having it kind of like automized or like part of your process. You're like, oh, I've released something new. Let's. But I just forgot. Like, so long ago that now it's like it'll be a whole day's worth of work, and that's just like for me right now. It's like, that's too much. I want to be a couch potato.
My goal is to make the process so streamlined that it gets out of the way of the creativeness.
Yeah. No, that's a good approach, because I think the moment you're kind of working on something that isn't actually meaningful, kind of meaningfully contributing to anything, and it's just the time sink, you need to do something about it. But no, honestly, Chris, thank you so much for taking some time to sit and have this chat. It's been delightful. I'm always, I'll be honest, I do have favorites when it is a chance to kind of chat to like other adventure designers. I won't hide I have a favorite child. but no, awesome. I guess otherwise, what is it? I've been Matthew Whitby, and you can find me at Whitby Writes. The product I was talking about at the start of this is the Longsaddle Gazetteer, which is out now, and it has all wondrous news for everything Longsaddle related, everything the Harpel family related. It's got too much content in it, arguably. So go check out the link in the description. But with that, I do have my favorite and my last question, which is, Chris, how do you end a podcast?
So I thought about this. I've seen you ask other guests on here, and I think it's just you roll credits and fade away.
Whoa!